Hello, viewers, and welcome to the second of our Formula One F1 2020 podcasts, looking at the F1 action this weekend, the Hungarian Grand Prix, race 3 on the calendar, and it still feels quite unusual, different time of year, and to have the race so early in the season. Again, I'm joined by Tim. Hello, Tim.
Good afternoon, Alan.
And good afternoon. And so today's race was full of action. It's certainly one where we're there are many points to talk about, but we'll struggle to be excited about the racing, I think, of this race. But we will catch up with the qualifying first. Interesting qualifying. We've had a week of controversy with, obviously, Renault applying to regarding the legality of the brakes on the racing points and the internal aspects. So it's created a lot of controversy this weekend, and we saw a strong performance from the racing points. I guess first, just a few thoughts from you, Tim, on qualifying for the race.
Firstly, I wish they were already known as Aston Martin, because they have a lot more presence on the grid than a Racing Point, which is a dreadful name. Never liked it. Anyway, we've always wanted to see a new team in the top 6 places on the grid outside of the traditional Mercedes, Red Bull and Ferrari. But there are question marks, aren't there, as to whether the Racing Point is actually a pure Racing Point or whether it is a copy of a 2019 Mercedes. I personally feel that to look at who's doing well in the sport, the championships. Championship leaders is Mercedes, so why not copy from the best? So, and that's what they've done. And you think back in the days of the legacy of that team, Force India, and before that, way back in the 90s and early 2000s, was Jordan, and that's the sort of thing which they kind of did. They always wanted to sort of take the best of what was best out there at the time. So I don't really sort of feel opposed to their way forward here, but as long as it's within the rules, and I think they're probably tugging on those rules a little bit too much at the moment. I don't know, but let's see what the courts decide, or what
I mean, it's one of those things where, like you say, engineers have always looked at other parts on cars, and they've always said, "Oh, let's take some photographs." And often they'd get zoom lenses, and they'd zoom right in, and everything else. And everyone's taking pictures of the undersides. But the funny thing about Formula One cars is it's not just what goes on. It's like saying, "Oh, we've got these winglets here," but you don't know where the air goes when it goes inside the car. You don't know how the electronics work on that car. So as much as you can see bits on the outside, they're actually a very small part of how the car is packaged in terms of balance and how it works. So I think in that sense, you can copy bits, but quite often you'll hear engineers say, we could develop that, but it would take, months to develop, if you like. And sometimes it's the different philosophy in terms of car design. The thing about this Racing Point is it is a different philosophy for them. It's a big change from last year. And the question is going to be, the feeling from at least McLaren and Renault seems to be that it's a clone rather than just copying. It's an actual clone. And I think that's going to be interesting if there are loopholes. My only concern is, and this kind of comes a little bit with engine supply, is you often feel that the customers are somehow obliged to the teams, and there's some control there from the works teams. And I that's my only concern, is that you end up with A teams and B teams, and then you've really got a problem. It's bad enough with the financial breakdown, but I when you've got McLaren and Renault and other teams, battling to try and develop their cars, if Mercedes decided, right, we're going to make Williams and Racing Point identical to last year's car, well, then that's it. Then they could control the top 6, and away we go. It depends on how close it goes and how far they want to go. Obviously, we have the rule change in 2022, and hopefully that will work more as a leveler. But I just think that in terms of, the funny thing is, you always need all the rules in sport, and there were a lot in years ago that were gentlemen's agreements. I felt there was more gentlemanly conduct in terms of what was right and wrong. Now everything needs to be in writing, basically. So we'll see where we go with F1, but it was certainly interesting to see that.
Yeah, I agree to a point now. But had the result, and we'll go into the race in a minute, but
Yeah.
had the result been Racing Point third and fourth, I would have thought, yeah, there's a bit of an issue here. But Perez and Stroll, whilst Stroll did a good race today, they are no Bottas and Hamilton, for example. So I still, whilst if there is a copycat element to it or a clone element, great, but they're not on par with the Mercedes at the race pace. So that's my objection.
I suppose in a way, though, it's a bit like, I was trying to think of another analogy, but if someone gave you the car and they say, right, there's the car, but we're not giving you any of the data, how it works. Every time they go to a circuit, it's new and it's going to work on its tyres differently. And it's a bit like Toto referring to some cars being a diva. We don't really know how super duper complex these cars are. So I think that even if somebody gave you the best car on the grid, you've still got to know how to run it. And maybe this year is a transitional year. And like you say, it'll be great to have the Aston Martin name back.
Yeah.
And it'll be great to have the Aston Martin name back, not knocking around at the back of the grid.
Mm.
So if we can, if this is a new basis for the future and everything continues in the way it should from here, then hopefully from next year onwards, they'll be able to sort it out amongst themselves.
Funny though, before we move on to the race, funny though they're not saying the same thing about the Alfa Romeo and Ferrari. Let's not deny that there's probably a lot of transfer of information between those two setups, because Alfa Romeo is very much heavily funded by Ferrari.
Yeah.
But because they're at the back of the grid, no one will sort of say anything bad about that, will they?
No, well, this is the point, though. I mean, I guess in a way it's a bit like, I think the Toro Rosso used to have a Ferrari rear suspension, or there was a suspension issue or something like that, but in the past. But I think that they're different enough. If anything, the Alfa Romeo has been quite a different car these last couple of years to look at. It certainly seems like they've got their own strategy, but it's not a carbon copy in quite the same way. And I think that where McLaren, I mean, they've been quite open in what they think of it, last year's Mercedes. And I think Renault, they're pumping so much money into their car development that to see a team suddenly jump years of development and move up the grid like that is, if it was easy as just, copy that Mercedes, then they would all do it.
Yeah.
But there's two parts to this equation. There's one is copying the chassis, and two is having the best power unit on the grid. And the Mercedes is head and shoulders the best power unit on the grid. And I think until the other competitors can have a power unit that can compete, nothing will change. And hence we've been stuck in this for the entire hybrid era. Mercedes have had that most powerful engine. So I think, it stands out in quali. That's probably my only concern there. I like teams to be very independent, fiercely independent, race for themselves. I think that when we have A teams and B teams controlling the racing, it's all going to get, it's going to lose its soul in that sense, in terms of what Formula One is all about. Standout performance, though, I just wanted to say, was George Russell in qualifying for me, driving the wheels off that Williams.
In the dry as well. So which was very good,
Controlled, absolutely amazing performance from him. And of course we saw Alex Albon struggling, which it later turned out today. Christian admitted it was the team's fault, and that he had the wrong tyre pressures in some way. So that definitely made a big difference to Alex Albon. Very important to know when you see drivers that are not qualifying close together from the same team, that driver's a second faster than the teammate. No, it just doesn't happen like that. Often cars are built around one driver, and it's up to the number two driver to get on top of that and fight their way in the team the best they can. And so it's important, I think, like for Alex, to just keep on, letting people know. And I know it's a little bit from the race, we all come back to it, but he did say in the race about giving me more power. Why aren't you giving me more power? And it was the first time that I've heard something from him that says, why aren't you giving me what you're giving him, sort of thing, in that sense. And I certainly feel that from Red Bull. And in a way, I've always felt Christian Horner is somebody who needs that from his drivers. He needs them to be fighting a bit more. He likes a bit of that. So that's qualifying. I guess we should move on to the race now. The stunningly exciting Hungarian Grand Prix today, and I've got a plane flying overhead, so you probably can't hear me. But race today. So action on the way to the grid. Then we had Max going off, damaging what appeared to be his front wishbone, and being replaced in 10 minutes by the give or take by the Red Bull mechanics. Give those guys a pay rise. I think they should get a bonus tonight for that. So, I mean, it can happen. Cold tires, wait the grid. You're doing things on your installation lap. God knows what, testing systems. And suddenly, before you know it, you've hit a puddle or something and you're going off. So, amazing repair from him. Haas pitting as well, starting the race from the pits. And wow, didn't it work out for them as well in the early part of the race? So, and of course, then we've got the start, what appeared to be a bit of a false start from Bottas. So just on those points, Tim, I'll let you take away on the start of the race.
So yeah, so Max crashed on his on the way round to the grid. I thought it was a bit of a noob error, really. It was a damp track, so why are you trying to spin up the rear tires so much? But anyway, that's what he did, and gave his team a bit of a headache for the start. But they made the start by 20 seconds apparently, which is good for them. And then on the parade lap, like I said, we saw the Haas diving into the pits. I really would love to know what's the post-race situation with the Alpha Tauris, though, because Kvyat really wanted to come into the pits to switch to the slick tyres, and he should have done. He should have overruled his team, because I think he could have ended up being in the points at the end of the day quite easily in one of those cars. And then, yes, we saw was it a jump start or was it not a jump start by Bottas? But interestingly, we never really saw a replay of, certainly from Bottas's view, in the TV feed, which I thought was a little odd. And I thought,
well,
oh my God.
Actually, I'm going to interrupt you there, Tim. I did actually watch the post-race coverage. Nan Davidson did analyse it.
No, absolutely. And this is what I was going to say. But in the actual race, you never saw that. So everyone was asking on social media, what is going on? Was it a jump start? Was it not a jump start? And there was no sort of investigation going on. So clearly it was deemed to be okay. And like you say, yes, after the race there was a review. But I kind of feel like if Sky F1 can do the analysis by themselves, why can't we see that on the official F1 feed? Yes. We've killed everyone's sort of like, old Mercedes are getting let off again sort of thing. It would have been so nice to have seen that in the actual footage, to seen that he didn't move outside his box, and again his lightning reactions was that as the lights went out, he was able to control his car. But yeah, it was. I kind of felt like the most interesting aspects of the race were within the first few milliseconds of the actual Grand Prix.
Yes, it wasn't a stunning race, and we were hoping for rain throughout. Just a word on Bottas. I mean, obviously, when I saw the initial start, it looked very much like he moved beyond that tolerance. But on the replay, I think what's quite interesting, and he'll have a word with the team about, is the start lights, which they have on the steering wheel, went out for him, indicating he should go, but clearly, he shouldn't. And that's something where the team will need to look into that, because it absolutely destroyed his race today. So, and of course, I have these start lights on their wheel because I can't always see with the halo in the way now, the actual lights themselves. So that's a really key issue that basically ruined Bottas's race today. And I kind of felt like it took a lot out of the race as well, because then there was just nobody for Lewis to compete with. He's just in a car that's in another league, and that Mercedes really is, in a place all of its own. We had a fire, obviously, for Pierre Gasly, engine fire, which was just about the only. We could have so done with a safety car, I was thinking, when we see some of this going on. And there was this moment I just want to mention about Alex Albon in the race, when he said, "Give me more power," struggling to overtake Leclerc early on in the Ferrari. And even then, he needed a bit of a lunge. It just showed that the Honda, for whatever reason, down the straight line speed was very poor today. And I just thought to myself that's everything that's wrong with Formula One. The fact that a driver is driving around and he has to ask somebody at base in the UK to
Yeah.
control an element of his engine to enable him to use his car. That to me is everything that is wrong. That driver should be using the car. He should be. You give the driver the car. It just underlines to me everything about it. And I say no, that's not Formula One to me. When a driver's like saying, I need the people in mission control to make my car do something. Imagine playing Formula One, and you're playing Formula One. You no longer have control of your engine modes and everything else. It's all done for you. It's amazing how much they're a passenger in the car, apart from talking about the tires and what they're actually feeling in the driving. They're just told everything to do. And I think that when you're actually playing the game, you're doing more than the real drivers are, essentially, because you're deciding on what to do, in terms of how your strategy and working on it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I heard that today and just thought, it's a bit of a shame. There were good little battles going on all around the circuit, though we saw Perez falling backwards. I didn't quite see all of that, and Lando Norris falling a long way down at the start as well.
I think they just struggled with the getaway from the grid, and I think so. I'm not sure whether Norris got tangled with anyone, but I just saw a McLaren or a bright orange spot on the screen just sort of slide down the grid, basically, which was really disappointing to see after a great start to the season by Lando. But as I said, it was still tight in that midfield throughout most of the Grand Prix, which is great to see. But yeah, when you've got a Mercedes that's 3 seconds clear after one lap on a drying track ahead of a racing point, it was job done for Lewis right at the start.
I just, it's just shame there's just not more competitive place in Formula One, and there hasn't been in this hybrid era. It's never been competitive, and in fact, I think I've mentioned it many times, but it was always the fear when obviously Mercedes said they wouldn't join Formula One unless they had the introduction of the hybrid engines. And I remember Adrian Newey in 2013 saying, well, we've basically got no chance. I mean, they knew that the technology that Renault had was way behind. And there's lots, if you do your research, you find lots of reasons why that's the case. And I think we're still just seeing the same old, really. Not only do they have a great chassis, but they just have the best power unit. And I think what I was looking at was a lot of the straight line speed battles going on. For example, Daniel Ricciardo was doing quite well. He had soft tyres at the end, unable to pass a Mercedes engine, just couldn't get close enough down the start-finish straight. And I think that was McLaren's problem today as well. For the most part, they couldn't do it into turn one. The only place they could try and overtake was into turn two. And I think that's on turn three. That's where at least you can get a bit of drivability at the corner of turn one. And maybe the conditions kind of aided a little bit of that because there was less grip on the inside. But I think the power battle it's kind of over. And I think really now the battle's between the two Mercedes for this year, obviously for the championship. I really hope that Mercedes let them fight. I hope they let them fight because they've won they're going to win the world championship. I think that's done and dusted, frankly. I can't see anyone getting closer to domination. With 3 races into a short season, that Mercedes is incredible. I do think watching it today, I mean, Lewis lapped up to 5th place today. He would have lapped up to 3rd if he hadn't done his pit stop.
Yeah.
So that just puts you in perspective that the Mercedes can lap the entire field.
And he wasn't on full pelt.
No,
he was cruising.
Yeah. Cruising. I mean, watching it go round, I was watching it thinking it's more like a smooth video game. It's like traction controls turned on. Yes. And it's just so smooth going round. There's no wheel spin, oversteer, nothing. It was just smooth on the power, and there's just no pressure. Having said that, I mean, Lewis obviously is very intense in the car. I mean, on his radio messages today, he was still very intense, because to him it's always pushing. And for a team, you're always controlling drivers like him. I always used to remember Michael Schumacher, if he ever made a mistake, it was always when he was 30 seconds in lead, still giving it absolutely everything. And sometimes you need to back off and cruise a bit. And I think the team are sort of always controlling that. But Hungarian Grand Prix, I thought, was the first race of the season where we didn't have lots of failures. We didn't have any safety cars, and it really showed the structure of where the teams are. So Mercedes are dominant. Red Bull seem to have bits that they need to fix, but Christian Horner is confident that they can fix those and get back on course. Ferrari, I don't know what's happened to Ferrari. They should be right up there with Red Bull and Mercedes, and they've completely fallen apart. We can talk about the engine, fuel flow, we can talk about the battery systems, but there seems to be more missing from the mojo of that team.
Despite having the fuel flow issue, which has been talked about a lot, they should still be able to create a decent motor racing car that should be at least finishing, fifth, sixth every single race. If and that should be a bad day. Yeah, they're not. They just seem to be all over the place, really, in terms of what their performance is, and they shouldn't be fighting for, 10th, 11th place for Leclerc, wherever he finished in the end, but 11th place. So it's sad days for Maranello, and yet lo and behold, we're going to be racing at Mugello later in the year, which is the home of Ferrari. So let's hope that they find some pace before they turn a wheel at that track.
They do need to find a bit. I'm sure they will find it. There's something clearly not working on the car, and I'm sure they'll find their pace there. I just see the problem is I do see it very much as a Mercedes track. There's a couple of really high speed power sections, and that main straight is going to just be Mercedes cars driving past everybody else down that start, because it's a very long start finish straight, and I'm just a bit concerned about that. I think on the whole, do you know when you see drivers and teams and they just don't seem very happy? This was one of those weekends where nobody seemed very happy, unfortunately.
Unless you're in a black Mercedes.
Exactly. But I will say, the funny thing about classically, Hungaroring has always been difficult to overtake on. Getting into turn one has been the only place to overtake. Engine performance and DRS kind of make that even. They alter it in a different way. I think we need, when we get these cars that can follow more closely, that'll change things. I think the Formula One's so prepped in terms of tyres as well. And I watched the Formula 2 races, and tyre deg was very high on the circuit. And today they had pit stops and everything in the morning race. And I noticed over the course of the weekend that there was a lot of tyre deg. And I was expecting today tyre deg in terms of marbles to be a bit higher around the circuit, because that's what we were seeing in the support races, and we didn't see anything like that really. But the teams are so well drilled in understanding the tyres that we don't really even talk about the tyres very much, really, so much as graining and temperatures and everything. It's just we know where we are with them, and you get on with it. So I think in that sense, that first race you said it was back to school, and now it's suddenly we know what we're doing again now, and it's set into a status quo. So I guess really, who's your driver of the day today, Tim? And what was your sort of key highlights?
Yeah, my driver of the day is something that we haven't even mentioned yet, and I was actually, when it flashed up on the screen at the end of the race, who was in the top three driver of the day vote. I was like, it wasn't even mentioned. I was like, is no one going to mention Kevin Magnussen? I personally think that, inspired decision by Haas or Kevin, whoever it was, on the Haas pit wall to pit at the end of the parade lap. He was running very well competitively in third, fourth, fifth for the first half of the race, and I was glued to the screens, hoping that they was going to keep that gap to the chasing Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc in 10th and 11th by the end of it, and for Kevin Magnussen to come away with a 9th place finish, 2 points after starting 16th on the grid. I think that's, for me, a very worthy driver of the day on my side, and certainly has to have had a terrible start to the season, really. So so that's my driver of the day. But no, on the whole, it was back to a Hungarian Grand Prix of old, prior to the days of reprofiling that first corner, really. Hunger boring was what it was used to be known back then, and I felt like that again today. So thank God that we're not doing a double header at Hungary, which I'll be happy to say. Looking forward to Silverstone. Rarely do we get a bad race there. So obviously we've got the British Grand Prix in 2 weeks, followed by the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, which I just think is a little bit of a weird title for a Grand Prix race, but it is what it is. It's Mercedes domination in 2020. Lewis is just going to stroll to his 7th title, I think. So, but let's hope there is a little bit of a battle between him and Valtteri through the rest of the season. Red Bull, they're still following their mantra of we have one driver that's good and one driver that will just do okay, So let's hope that Alex Albon is able to get further support from the team going forward. And I think, as we said last time, Racing Point are there to upset the form, but I think we're going to see strong qualifying performances from Racing Point. But on race day, I don't expect them to see them carry that one lap pace forward through into the race.
No. I think for me today, I was quite impressed with Daniel Ricciardo, actually. Today, he didn't get mentioned, but obviously was doing a fine job with what he had. As I say, clearly the Renault pace was struggling there, and he was a topper, I think, of the Renault races today as well. So a good result from him. Obviously, Kevin Magnussen, always a challenge to overtake. He was clean. He kept it going, despite the fact that the Ferrari obviously engine isn't quite performing the way it was. So no, I think Hungarian Grand Prix, quite a typical one, really. I mean, there are Hungarian Grand Prix like this. You have good races and bad races, and unfortunately today just needed a safety car. It needed a bit more action just to turn it on its head. And you've said it before, do away with the practice sessions. Have one quick practice and get them out there.
Just goes to show, doesn't it? I mean, let's say my dream would be scrap Friday, totally. Just turn Friday back in the normal world. Turn Friday into a media fans day. Then Saturday morning, 1 hour practice, straight into qualifying. Bring back Sunday practice. They out track for an hour and a half, whatever it is. Then go into the race. I still think that would be a much better, cleaner setup. And it just goes to show they don't need to have 3 hours of practice before qualifying.
No, it's too much. It always has been, and there's too much setup and perfection. And I think that when they don't have the time for that perfection, it brings a bit more. We need something there with all the computer control stuff. And I was mentioning, mission control helping the cars. They don't need that setup time anymore. They can get on with it. Exactly. I hope that we see that change as well. So for me, it was more of a topical race than an exciting one. I think what frustrates me is just seeing how far ahead Mercedes are. I just want someone to take it to them. I want to see action and drama at the very front. And I think this year our drama is going to be the battle for third. And that's, let's hope Red Bull can do it. I hope Red Bull can just bring something into it as we look forward. But that's it for this one. Let's looking to the British Grand Prix in a couple of weeks' time. And again, I do believe it's going to be very strong for Mercedes. It is a strong Mercedes circuit. So I think that apart from Mercedes, midfield battle could be good there. There's always lots of overtaking opportunities, lots of action, something I'm looking forward to. But no questions from anybody on this, not surprisingly, on this one. There was somebody did say something, and I said, no, we need those questions. Could it be nice to have had some questions? But there were none this week. That's how exciting the Grand Prix was. Let's hope we have a more exciting race in a couple of weeks' time. Do like and subscribe if you like this chat. Do let us know if there's any elements you'd like us to talk about on future podcasts as well, any core aspects to do with the drivers or the Formula One industry, or just our unique perspectives on things. But that's it from us for now. As ever, more soon. Hello viewers, well thanks for watching the video today. Do like and subscribe, it supports what we do. Do become a YouTube member. YouTube Patreon supports all of our content you see on the channel, and of course lots of gaming from retro to modern games. I love it all in terms of racing action. So click on one of the two videos just there to find out more.